What's up guys, ATCZ here, welcome back. Today I decided we're going to do something different. Since Konami is decided to basically print new support for all these old decks in the main sets now because they do not follow a specific anime to base their cards around, I'm pretty sure that eventually all decks that of the past are going to get some kind of support. So I think it is funny to try to predict what this support is going to be, or maybe you can say this is a suggestion of support, but I decided to not do some unpopular decks or some of the rogue decks. We want to take a look today at some of the old meta decks that have either been power crept or that have been butchered by the ban list. And since Konami is very reluctant to bring back cards from the ban list, it doesn't happen too often. They decide to often print more support for an old deck that is not as broken as the cards that have already been banned for that deck in order to avoid bringing back cards. This is what we're going to do today. I'm going to take a look at 5 decks that have been very dominant in the past, but right now they are either completely unplayable or they're very bad. So I'm going to suggest exactly what the support has to do in order for these decks to come back to life without having to bring back the old banned cards that are either too broken to come back or Konami is too afraid to bring back. So without further ado, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the video. Number 5, Burning Abyss. So Burning Abyss has started getting cards back from the ban list, but it will not get back Beatrice, unfortunately. This is most likely what's going to happen. We're going to have Graf and Seer at 3 back very soon, but Beatrice, I think she's going to stay at 1 probably forever. So in order to make this deck better, because right now Phantom Knights have just become the better rank 3 deck, we have to print something specific for BA so that it will actually make it a much better pure deck on its own. So the problem this deck has as a whole, I think, it doesn't have any draw power, because the way the deck functions, it has a lot of one-offs, and the extra deck is very important, so it cannot run either Extravagance or Desires. So I think a draw card is what this deck needs, and a draw card that doesn't just draw cards, but it can also add an extender in the top of drawing the cards. So my suggestion is a spell card that says you can send one level 3 Fiend monster from your hand to the grave and then draw 2 cards, and you can only activate this card of course once per turn. So what this does for the deck is not only does it draw you 2 cards to help you dig for stuff, but it also solves a lot of problems of the deck. The deck has a lot of normal summons now. With Tour Guide going to 3, we have 3 Tour Guide, 3 Fiendish Rhino Warrior, and we'll soon have 3 Graf most likely. And Graf is a monster you don't want to special summon because you want to use its effect. It's the most important effect during the first turn specifically. So you have actually 9 normal summons, and people have started cutting copies of Rhino Warrior, and I doubt people are going to play 3 copies of Graf when it's out because they don't want to see too many in their hand. So with a card like this, not only can you actually send the extra copies of the cards that you don't want to have in your hand to try to dig for other ones, but let's say if your Tour Gate gets stopped, you can use this card to discard maybe a Graf or a Libic, and then Graf will get you the Libic, and Libic will special summon a monster from the hand that will not blow itself up even though you have a Tour Gate on the field, so you can actually extend this way. Because right now, if Tour Gate is hit, unless you have a generic rank 3 extender, like maybe a Psychic Wielder or a Tracker, or maybe a Jackalope or Tsunoko, then you don't really have anything to do. And pure BA actually has a lot of cards that it needs to run. It's not as flexible as Phantom Knights, so it needs something like that in order to proceed to its plays, while also digging for stuff like hand traps, which is basically the main defense of the deck, or traps if you're playing the trap build, because the only inherent disruption the deck has is Beatrice with Farfa, so you need to be able to dig for other cards in order to stop them, because right now in today's metagame, one Beatrice is not going to stop your opponent unless they have not opened very optimally, so you need something to dig for more interruptions. Number 4, Spellbooks. Spellbooks is an interesting one because it has a card in the ban list that if brought back, it would make the deck really good again. It would probably at least a tier 2 deck because Spellbook of Judgment is that broken, but like I said before, Konami is very reluctant to bring back cards, especially cards that used to be this insanely powerful. Spellbook was a tier 0 deck along with Dragon Rulers, so I do not think they plan to ever bring this card back, at least not without an errata. So the deck needs something in order to be able to function, and the deck has good tools in order to be able to be playable, but they cannot actually use these tools very consistently. It did get a Link monster, but it's not a monster that you can summon very easily in this particular deck, because Spellbooks is not a deck that has a lot of monsters that can summon on the field without having a lot of setup. You usually summon your Spellbook Magician of Prophecy, and that's basically it. So you rely on stuff like Jester Confit and Magician Souls in order to get more spellcasters on the field in order to summon Crowley. So my suggestion is something that helps summon Crowley more fast, while also actually being something useful for the Spellbook engine itself. So I think a monster that can special summon itself from the hand, so if you control a spellcaster type monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, and also then you can send one Spellbook spell card from your deck to the grave. So what this does, aside from Magician's Souls and Jester Confit, which Jester Confit is not very optimal because all it does is special summon itself, so you can replace the Confit with this, so you play 6 copies of something that can special summon itself to the field. So if you start with your Spellbook Magician, even if it gets stopped, then you can summon this, then you can send your secrets to the grave, then you can go into Crowley, and then you can reveal maybe a Secrets, a Master, and a Knowledge. So this card makes Master much more powerful. Basically, it would become a 3-of, because right now Master is mostly a 2-of, but having a Foolish Burial Goods for the deck specifically makes Master really good, because even if you don't open secrets, or if you try to search secrets with Spellbook Magician and it gets Veilered, then you can special summon this, send the secrets from your deck to the grave, then use Master to copy the secrets to search your fate, so you have the disruption, and you also have the 2 masks for Crowley. And if you combine this with a Magician's Souls, that you can send the High Priestess to the grave, then you can use Crowley and then summon your Selene, so you can bring back your High Priestess and have a monster this way that is good going second, because High Priestess can pop cards. So what this deck does is more of an explosive engine, because the deck is very slow for today's standards, especially relying on one normal summon, so you need to be able to get more monsters on the field very quickly, while also enabling your engine with cards like Spellbook of the Master in order to get your searches, because the deck relies a lot on either secrets or the Spellbook Magician resolving. Otherwise, you do not have a grave full of Spellbook, so even if you hard draw on the Fate, you do not have something to banish for it to be able to be a disruption. Your tower is most likely dead because you don't have anything in the grave, so basically your whole engine falls apart because of this specific turn 1 play, or the first play did not go through, because we are in a format with a lot of hand drops, with a lot of interruption, so a deck that does not play through interruption is actually a very bad deck. So Spellbook has been power crept a lot, on top of having its best card being banned, so it needs something like this in order to be able to be playable again. Number 3, X-saber. X-saber is the only deck in this specific list that does not have any of its cards gone. The deck just has been power crept to death. You can actually argue that the has a card on the list being Rescue Cat, because it got an errata. It's not as powerful as it used to be for the deck, but Rescue Cat is at 3 right now, and I do not think if it did not have the errata it would be that busted right now. It would be better, but still it wouldn't be something really good. Unfortunately, X-saber did not manage to win the create a card poll for the TCG, so it's not going to get support from the TCG, so I hope the OCG fixes that and gives us something good. The last card that X-saber got was actually a spell card that relied on you taking damage in order to be able to use, so of course in today's standards this card is very much unplayable because it's very slow. So I think the deck needs to be able to be modernized with a Link Monster. Basically a Link Monster is what made all those old decks become really good again, and especially Link ones that are so powerful, like something like Traptrix Serra, which made Traptrix a deck again, maybe not a tier 1 deck, but it was a very playable deck just because of this one card. So I think this is what we need to do here. So a Link 1 that requires an X-saber, of course, and on summon you can special summon an X-saber monster from your deck. Now we have to be very careful with a card like this, because X-saber is the king of hand loops if played correctly, so we need to put a restriction on it that you can only special summon twice more after this effect resolves. So the reason you want to do that is, let's say you have a Full Health Knight or Air Balloon, basically a level 3 tuner. So you summon this, you Link 1, then you summon your Fall Troll. Fall Troll will bring back the monster you used to Link summon, that's 1 special summon, and then you Synchro Summon into Gothams, and that's 2 special summons, and this is basically what you can do for the rest of this turn. And this, you need to do this, because if you don't have a restriction like this, or if you have a restriction that you can just special summon X-sabers, then you can loop Fall Trolls and then basically hand loop your opponent for free. This, if you just have the level 3 tuner, you can hand loop 2 cards, which is by tributing the Link 1 and the Gothams you will summon. If you start with Bogart Knight and level 3, you can loop 3 cards, and if you already have the Fall Troll in your hand, then you can loop 4 cards. But even if you loop 4 cards, which sounds ridiculous, which basically is today's standards, the problem is that today's hand loops do not just hand loop, they end on a really good board as well. If you hand loop with X-sabers, you end on nothing. And this is why a hand loop like this is not as broken as the hand loops we are used to by now, because your opponent, yes, they will start with 1 card in their hand, their draw phase, or maybe 0 if your hand was really good, but you're basically using a Chaos Emperor old-like effect that you don't have, both players don't have anything. So you're just top-taking at this point. So this is why this is something that is not as unhealthy for the game as is hand looping for 3 cards on top of having 5 negates on the field. And this is basically what X-saber's only strength lies right now. It's a beatdown deck, which is not a heavy contender right now. At any point, no beatdown decks can win right now going second, because going second is basically dead. So the only other thing the deck can do, because it doesn't have any inherent negates, from using something like a Saber Hole, but still it's not the best card, so you need to be able to use its condition, which is hand looping. So you need to make the hand loop more viable while not making it broken. So that's why I think this Link Monster with this specific restriction is actually something that would make the deck a decent pick if you want to be something like a controlled deck, so you can actually handle your opponent and have fun top decking from this point. And the deck has really good top decks and can also get searches during the end phase with Dark Soul, so it can refill its hand like this. So it would be something that will make the deck at least playable. So this is why I'm trying to do with this. Number 2, Sky Striker. So Sky Striker, again, it has a broken card on the ban list. It's not as broken as Spellbook of Judgment, but the problem with Engage is that it's splashable, so this is why it makes it even harder for Engage to come back from the ban list than Spellbook of Judgment. So this is why I think Konami does not plan to bring back Engage, so if they don't bring back Engage, they have to do something for Sky Striker, because it's a fun favorite deck. I know a lot of people like it. Yeah, I know people hated it, but they hated it because it was being splashable. The pure deck was just perfectly fine. I'd say it's one of the most fair tier 1 decks that we've ever had in the game, because you felt like you were playing when you were playing against it, even though you don't really have a chance because you're going to get outgrounded, but it's not something that wins in one turn. You feel like you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Even though you are most likely going to lose. So this is why I really like Sky Strikers, and I thought they were really, really good for the format until they became splashable in the Orcas deck. This is what they brought them out to the top, and this is basically why Engage is banned right now. So I think we need to see the Link monster in the spell card, the Scissor Cross that we got, because Rose did get Link 2, but this is not the monster what we've seen in the spell card. So my suggestion is a Link 1, which we already know the art of for, because we've seen the Rose in the armor in that spell card. So what I think this card should do is, of course, you need to use a Sky Striker monster with a different attribute. Of course, yes, it's basically what every Link does. And on summon, it recycles one of your banished Sky Striker spell cards. So what this card does is it basically is like a Guardian for the Banished Zone that gives you infinite resources, because the limit to this deck is when all of your cards have been banished with multi-roll. With a card like this, when your cards are banished with multi-roll, you add them back. And then you add another card back from your grave with Kagari. So it kind of replaces the plus that we've lost with Engage being banned, because Engage was what this deck had in order to plus, and this deck cannot really plus too good right now. At mostly it's a +1, but during the end phase with Izuku, so unless you have multi-roll on the field, that card you added doesn't do anything. So with this card, each turn you can add a card back from your grave with Kagari, then you can use this to add card during your banished zone, and then during the end phase you can add a card with Izuku. And this card is not as broken as it sounds, because in order to be live, you have to have access to your multi-roll and have gone through a couple turns in order to use multi-roll to then use the card you said with multi-roll so it can get banished. You can also play Gold Sarcophagus if a card like that is released, so you can banish multi-roll itself or maybe a Widow Anchor and then summon this to get it back to your hands, so it would make another search, and it would also put a spell in the grave with Gold Sarcophagus, so it would be something really good. So I think if we cannot get back Engaged, then something like this is basically what we need. I'm pretty sure we are going to get this monster, but not this specific effect, will probably something else, but this monster will be printed because Konami stays true to the lore, so they will try to print pretty much anything that is related to the Sky Striker lore, and since we've seen this monster, like I said in the spell card, we are going to get it eventually, but probably the effect will not be the optimal one that I suggested right now. Number 1, Nekros. Now I know what you're thinking, Nekros just got announced to get a new card, but the problem with this new card is it doesn't change the playstyle that Nekros has adopted in order to be able to be playable in this format. Nekros used to be a really, really fun, interactive, of course, when Dijin got banned, don't get me wrong, Dijin was unhealthy, I do not suggest that Dijin would ever bring back to the list, but once Dijin got banned, the deck was really, really skillful resource management deck. It needed a lot of skill in order to be able to play it, and if you did not have the knowledge of the deck, you were going to lose to pretty much anything, because it was not a deck that would hand you free wins. And this is why I really liked Nekros back in the day. But right now, Nekros has become a deck that will lock you with Vanity's Ruler and Archel Christia, that's pretty much it. And this is not how Nekros should be played. I know it had to adapt to that playstyle in order to be able to survive in a meta like this. It's still not a good deck right now, it's still not tier 1 by far. So what I think is a new card should be able to kind of bring back the old playstyle of the deck, giving it more interaction rather than using a Floodgate monster, and making the deck more skillful. So my suggestion is a quick play ritual spell card. So this is not something new. Demise and Ruin do have a quick play that ritual summons, so it's not something like that's completely pretty much absurd. Clausulas searches spell cards and trap cards, but we don't get to the trap card here because the deck doesn't have any traps and it should never have any traps. So it doesn't search any ritual spells, so you can search this with your Clausulas. Doesn't matter that it's not a ritual spell specifically. And what it should do is, if your opponent controls a monster from the extra deck, you can ritual summon by using a material from your deck. So you can ritual summon pretty much anything, all the any Nekros monster, but if your opponent doesn't have anything from the extra deck, it's just a normal ritual spell that tributes the exact same levels. But if your opponent does have a monster from the extra deck, you can actually tribute one monster from your deck. This does do things for the deck. First of all, it's a quick play, so you can ritual summon during your opponent's turn, which is what the deck lacks right now. It doesn't have any interruptions, so when you use this, you can actually summon Trishula during your opponent's turn, which is very devastating if you resolve it fully. If your Unicorn is used like in Perma, Dark Ruler No More Droplet, then you can use this to swap it for another Unicorn, so you can use the effect of the quick play to basically replenish your field with a new Floodgate, which is not Christia or Vanity's Ruler. It's something that the deck actually does, which is locking your opponent's extra deck monsters with Unicorn, and it also helps you get access to Shuri from your deck if your opponent has committed to the extra deck. So it's a kind of like a Shadow Fusion card, but combined with El Shadow Fusion. This is what I try to do with this card. So if your opponent has summoned from the extra deck, if you use it during your opponent's turn, you can send a Shuri from your deck, then use the full tribute of Shuri, summon any ritual monster, most likely Trishula. You're going to disrupt your opponent, and Shuri will give you a search for basically for your own next turn, so you can have a resource game. This is what the deck needs to be like, and I'm kind of sad that the deck is not like that anymore, and it's more of a incantation tribute to Vanity's Ruler locked that deck, which is not fun at all if you want to play the deck like you used to play it when you were playing it back in the day, if you remember the good old days with Nekros. So this is why I just think that the monster that the deck got to be announced right now is not what the deck needs, and it's something that can make the old playstyle playable. This is what I try to do with the spell card. So yep, that's the video, guys. These are my suggestions. If you have any suggestions for these specific decks, or if you think that any other one of the old meta decks deserves to get a new card instead of getting cards back from the ban list, can make it playable. Of course, there are some decks that rely heavily on cards coming back from the ban list. For example, Dragon Rulers. This deck cannot be playable again unless the other 3 Dragon Rulers come back to 1 from their ban list, because you cannot bring support for a deck that's completely dead. So yeah, there's that too. So leave your suggestions down below. If you have any specific effects that you want to mention about any deck, we will be happy to take a look at those. And I think that Konami is watching us. They are taking several ideas for their new support, because like I said, their sets basically are now support for all decks and a couple new decks here and there, but they don't rely on an anime, so they bring back all decks, and I'm sure these old meta decks are eventually going to get support very, very soon. So yep, that's the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos, and we'll see you next time.